Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. I am Mario Gooden, the president of the Architectural League, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our online version of the current work series featuring May Al-Ibrashy, who is chair of the Built Environment Collective and principal of Megawra. This 2022-23 season of the current work series examines projects and firms enacting modes of architectural practice, collaboration, and community engagement. This program is supported in part by funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council and by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. Our current work series is co-sponsored by the Irwin S. Shannon School of Architecture of the Cooper Union, and we thank the Cooper Union for its partnership. The Architectural League additionally thanks its members whose support helps make possible this and other programs. I would also like to announce to be on the lookout for the announcement of the 2023 League Prize winners and their lectures that will be announced tomorrow, Wednesday, May 3rd. And for those of you in our audience who are local and here in New York, in the New York City area, there is still space available for our final First Friday in-person event of the season on this coming Friday, May 5th, at the offices of HOK here in Manhattan. So now let me introduce today's moderator, Randy Mason. Randy Mason teaches in the graduate program in historic preservation and is a professor in the Department of City and Regional Planning at the University of Pennsylvania's Stuart Weitzman School of Design, where he focuses on historic preservation planning, urban conservation, history, and cultural landscape studies. Randy's research interests include history and theory of preservation, preservation planning, the economics of preservation, historic site management, and the history and design of memorials. Randy served as program chair from 2009 to 2017 and executive director of Penn Praxis from 2014 to 2017. At Penn Weitzman, Randy leads two research groups, the Penn Praxis Urban Heritage Project, which undertakes planning, preservation, and cultural landscape projects for the National Park Service and other clients, as well as the Center for the Preservation of Civil Rights Sites, which conducts research, teaching, and fieldwork related to Black heritage places marking civil rights histories. Randy's publications include several books, The Once and Future New York, Historic Preservation and the Modern City, from the University of Minnesota Press, put out in 2009, which was winner of the SAH Antoinette Forrester Downing Award, and Giving Preservation a History, Histories of Historic Preservation in the United States, edited with Max Page, put up by Routledge in 2019. Also, Values in Heritage Management, edited by my colleague Erica Avrami and Susan McDonnell, Randy Mason and David Myers from Getty Publications in 2019. Before joining UPenn, Randy worked as a senior project specialist at the Getty Conservation Institute, researching economic and social issues related to heritage conservation. And he contributed to several Getty publications, including Economics and Heritage Conservation, Values and Benefits of Cultural Heritage Conservation, and Assessing the Values of Cultural Heritage. Randy's previous positions included assistant professor and director of historic preservation at the University of Maryland, and he was also an adjunct faculty in landscape architecture at the Rhode Island School of Design. Randy's professional experience includes many years of consulting practice and co-founding the nonprofit research group Minerva Partners. He served on the board of the directors of the Eastern State Penitentiary and was on the board of the Preservation Alliance of the Greater Philadelphia area from 2006 to 2013. It's my pleasure right now to turn it over to Randy Mason, who will introduce our speaker for today. Take it away, Randy.
Thank you, Mario, very much for that generous intro, and thank you to the Architecture League for inviting me to join the conversation today. I have to say it's been already a very rewarding experience for me because I've gotten the chance to study May Al-Ibrashy's work in Cairo, which is really fantastic, as you'll hear and see directly from her in just a moment. The work is powerful in a number of different ways, and I think is a real testament to innovative vision pointed at conservation, connected to design in many senses, and I think you'll find it as inspiring as I have. I'll try to give the briefest prologue to as an introduction to May herself. But that will really revolve around kind of a note of optimism, I would say, in the kind of recent trend to connect more profoundly and more energetically the work of heritage and conservation with the work of design more broadly. A lot of us in the field identify conservation and heritage work as a design field. I think that's a very positive trend, and I think it brings us closer into contact with kinds of practices, not just in capital A architecture and urban design, but also planning and community development that puts us in a position to more directly serve the communities for whom we work and to whom we have responsibility. The work of Megawra and the other work that you'll hear about from May in just a moment, I think follows through on the opportunities that are presented to us in practice these days to think about design and conservation as an aspect of design much more broadly and much more ambitiously. The kind of work that May's projects I think show us a really productive path forward to is really most profound in the sense that it shows heritage and its conservation reaching its fullest potential, and reaching its fullest potential because it is so intimately and intricately connected to other modes of design and development and community service and social well-being. I think the projects, as I've come to learn about them through her website and through her published work. Unfortunately, I've not been to Cairo to see the projects in person yet, but maybe I'll have a chance to knock on your door soon. These projects are really extraordinary. Among the reasons that I find them extraordinary is that they really happen at the scale of how people are experiencing these spaces, the scale of everyday space and experience in markets, in streets, in parks, in workplaces. I think the way that her projects weave together the aspects of everyday experience, and does it in a way that that I think pretty willfully transgresses the kinds of disciplinary barriers and agency barriers, financing barriers, and so on that we often encounter. I think really hold it up as a model for an inspirational model for others of us to follow. So I've got a clear page in my notebook to learn more and take more notes about May's work, hearing about it from herself. As you know, after May's presentation, there will be a Q&A period. A brief discussion between her and me, and then a period of Q&A. We encourage you now and throughout the talk and during the discussion to put your questions in the Q&A through Zoom, and we'll have access to those afterward to draw on in the time we have allowed. So with that, I don't have a prepared bio to read of May, but you'll see that you have seen already through the links that the League has made available, that she is trained as an architect and has a great deal of experience in practice in Cairo in Egypt. And I'm excited to welcome her now and to hear about her projects. So May Al-Ibrashy, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation and the conversation that follows.
Thank you, for this wonderful introduction. President lives up to it. And thank you to the Architecture League for the invitation to come and speak today. A special thanks to Amir Rafi for all the work that went into arranging this. I'm going to share screen now and just go ahead and start with the presentation. I'm assuming you can see my screen. Give me a heads up. I will talk today about what we do in Athar Lina Initiative in historic Cairo. And this is an initiative that I have been working on with many colleagues for the last more than 10 years now. Prior to that, I worked in conservation and heritage management for years, and I'm a conservation architect myself, and I hold a master's and a PhD in archaeology and art history from the University of London. So we work in the World Heritage Site of historic Cairo, and if you Google it, this is the first image that comes up. And it's an interesting image, I think, because it's kind of a bit nostalgic. It's evocative of, the charm of, I apologize for that term, but this is what it evokes to my mind, if you will. And it's an image of the view from the citadel of Cairo, one of the most iconic historic buildings in historic Cairo. The World Heritage Site of historic Cairo is one of the largest in the world, one of the largest World Heritage Sites in the world. It is 32 square kilometers. This is unbelievably unwieldy and difficult to manage. But also what you need to, and what you see on the right is the proposal of UNESCO for the borders of historic Cairo. Historic Cairo was established in the 10th century as Al-Khalifa, but actually the establishment of the settlement as a whole was as Islamic Cairo, if you will, was in the 7th century. So as you can see, it goes back quite a lot in time. What I'd like to point your attention to is the map on the left, where this small little dot is historic Cairo in the context of Greater Cairo. Over 450 square kilometers of where more than 20 million people reside. But I also want to point your attention to this, which is the planned new administrative capital of Cairo, which is another 700 plus square kilometers. So this is an unmanageable task, if you will, to manage a city this size. And it's quite paradoxical that as a heritage site, it's huge, but within the mammoth site of Greater Cairo, and if we add also the planned new capital, it's really almost insignificant. And that tends to be one of our biggest problems. And the problem, you can see this problem in this image, which is what you see on the other side of the citadel. You see in the background, the iconic mosques of this one is Sultan Hassan from the early 14th century. But in the foreground, you see that it is very much a living city. It is very much a modern city. It is very much reflective of the kinds of mega cities we see in the global south. And we don't want it any other way. We want it to be a city. We also have to acknowledge the challenges that come with a city of this sort. We go to the challenges, but I want to start with why it is such a charming place from my perspective. I think it is charming because maybe around every corner there will be a surprise of one kind or the other, some unpleasant, but many of them pleasant and definitely diverse. If you enter some of the historic buildings in particular, you enter another world of color and pattern and geometry. It's truly sublime. And it kind of really transports you into another realm of beauty and quietness and etc. The challenges are multiple between pollution, traffic, poor maintenance of historic buildings and other buildings, poor urban management, especially in terms of the implementation, but also in terms of the multitude of different governments bodies that are in charge of historic Cairo and where coordination is difficult. And also recently, quite a notable spate of destruction, mostly to build highways and flyovers and bridges to connect the different parts of Greater Cairo together. And these encroachments of the historic city through its neighborhoods and are quite disruptive. Many others as well, but I would kind of like to end this introduction on a positive note, which for me is the resilience of the people of historic Cairo, their ability to create joy and beauty within what might seem to the outside eye a truly hopeless situation. And I think this is keeps all alive and kicking in this amazing. So where do we come in? We are called and we are an initiative established in 2012, and we are run by we are co-run by an NGO, the Built Environment Collective, and a private firm called Megawra. And most of our work is in partnership with the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, some of it with Cairo Governorate, and the work of the NGO obviously is under the supervision of the Ministry of Social Solidarity. So right from the start, there's this interesting mix of different kinds of players and actors that are required to get the job done. We have a mandate of heritage as a driver for development and a general vision to improve the built environment and the quality of life in the city for heritage and people alike. We try to understand the issues, to link them together, to lead solutions and integrate them, to work in a participatory and creative manner, to deal with the challenges of historic Cairo, which, as I mentioned. The word Athar Lina translates as heritage hours, and we deliberately chose that name because in 2012 we started to investigate the issues as we see them of historic Cairo, and bear in mind that most of us had been working in heritage before, and I had been working by that time for close to 20 years in heritage. We started to, we felt that one of the major obstacles towards working in a true in historic Cairo was the fact that people had lost quite a good part of their sense of ownership of their heritage in this heritage site. And this for us was emblematic. What was emblematic was the fact that in one of the neighborhoods, the neighborhood where we work now, Al-Khalifa, we noticed that the 2012 was a bit of a breakdown in services in general. We noticed that in front of every monument there was a pile of garbage. And this is not people throwing garbage there willy-nilly. This is actually an agreement between the community and government. This is the no man's where garbage can be put and collected. And for us, this was quite indicative of the size of the problem. We also felt that this process of disenfranchisement probably was for different reasons, but one of the reasons might have been the fact that with the truly admirable, the birth of the truly admirable efforts of the Egyptian government to start to conserve the heritage of historic Cairo at the turn of the 19th century, came a drive to protect it. To choose certain buildings, to list them, and to protect them from, among other things, the community. And that drive came with what are called monument buffer zones. You see here on the left a building in one of the neighborhoods where we work, and how after the work of the conservation authorities, a fence had been established around it, and to establish that fence, many of the abutting structures, some of them of extreme spiritual importance, such as the graves that you see, the tombs that you see on your left, were removed. And these kinds of no man's zones, if you will, were the place where people start to throw garbage, etc. Because as they are denied access to these sites, they are denied ownership of these sites, and as such, they see them as alien. Of course, I'm exaggerating, as relatively alien to the rest of the neighborhood. So we started in 2012 for 6 months simply talking about these issues with a number of different stakeholders, most notably the community, to start to understand one neighborhood within a district in the southern section of historic Cairo, which is Al-Khalifa Street area, and you can see it marked here. Then bit by bit, we started to work in other neighborhoods within the same district of Al-Khalifa. So Imam Shafi'i Cemetery, which is a totally different story. The first one, Al-Khalifa Street area, is a vibrant residential neighborhood, with workshops and with a quite high concentration of spiritual sites of spirituality, so domes and mosques, etc. The second one is a cemetery, is a historic cemetery. As you can see, completely built up, but a cemetery, so a totally different urban fabric and socioeconomic makeup. And the third neighborhood is also a residential neighborhood as well, but with a different topography. It's a topography that is rare in historic Cairo. It is a sloping neighborhood immediately, and this is important, north of the citadel of Cairo, which is here, from which I showed you the images at the beginning of the presentation. So I hope that you can see this short film and that the quality is fine. This is a short 2-minute film that shows you the kind of work that we do so that we do not kind of have to go through it all over again. So we work on conservation, on heritage education, heritage industries, and also on urban regeneration, and with a number of different focuses. I think what's important to highlight in the images that you see and that you see in front of you is how people-centric the work that we do is. That at the end of the day, yes, our mandate is to conserve the heritage of historic Cairo, but first of all, we have a much wider understanding of heritage that includes intangible heritage, for example, oral histories, heritage in the make, culture, but also everything that we do involves the community one way or the other, whether through creation of jobs or through participation in the decision-making process, or through improvement of the quality of public spaces and open spaces. And it also involves a kind of a more narrow community, professionals and academics, through knowledge generation, synthesis of knowledge and knowledge sharing, and knowledge exchange. We also work in an interdisciplinary manner, so you will see that quite a bit of the work is the work of artists and people who work in design, in archaeology, in conservation, obviously. It is more of an architect-led initiative, but that does not mean, but we actually try to kind of free ourselves of that mantle as much as possible. Our interest in the environment came a bit late, and I will refer to it in later slides, but it actually came from a concern with issues of groundwater that we face in the neighborhood, and it led to us thinking about integrated solutions for action of this water from around the heritage sites and its reuse, and this again I will refer to right now. So to sum up, starting 2012, after 6 months of deliberation with different stakeholders on how to approach a problem such as historic Cairo in a neighborhood or a district such as Al-Khalifa, we work on 3 action lines: conserving heritage sites and adapting them for reuse for the benefit of the community; heritage education for children and women, which for us is very important to foster this sense of ownership of heritage at a young age and the level of the entire family; and most importantly and most complicated, grounding heritage in the socio-economic of its urban context, linking it to the betterment and linking it to the improvement of quality of life in urban space through urban regeneration and urban development, heritage industries, and dealing with environmental issues. So today I will talk about our 4 newest projects and use them as a gateway to refer to older projects and how they build on previous experience and how they connect and they interact. And this, for me, is a very important theme that I will probably refer to over and over again. So the four projects are Earth, which is a project that looks at climate change and heritage. Heritage Works, a heritage industries project. Patterns of Cairo, more of research and knowledge generation. And Tahayuz, which is an educational platform that we are trying to set up. So Earth is quite a complicated project. It is funded by the Cultural Protection Fund, the British Council, and it tries to deal with integrated solutions for climate change impact through conservation, training, and community participation. We work on the conservation of two monuments from the 12th and the 14th century, and as you can see, their condition is quite severe and they're quite dilapidated, and you can also see that a lot of their structural issues in particular are linked to problems of the soil, which are in turn linked to groundwater issues, and this I will be referring to over and over again. What is the link to climate change? This is an extract from a report I prepared for UNESCO on the occasion of COP27 here in Cairo, and Egypt is one of the countries that is most affected by climate change in terms of heritage. We have a number of decay phenomena: salt attack, rising damp and inundation, structural damage to foundations and superstructures due to soil movement and coastal erosion, weathering due to temperature rise and poor air quality, cracks and fissures due to higher temperature differentials, water infiltration and flooding due to extreme rain and flash floods. And the argument is that you cannot deal with these issues without, unless you have a solid foundation of cultural resilience and well-being, etc. And also that cultural heritage is an excellent platform for educating the public on climate change. So the Earth has components now. Earth, play on word. Earth in Arabic means heritage, and obviously Earth in English. So this is why we chose this this name for the project. There are three components. The first is the conservation of the two buildings that I just showed you, and documenting the techniques of conservation that we use so that they go into a manual a manual that explains how to conserve buildings that are suffering from the impact of climate change. Because these two buildings have all the manifestations, the decay manifestations, and damage that are linked to climate change, or many of them. The conservation aspect builds on the conservation work that we have already done on 5 buildings to date, all of them domes. And because both buildings suffer from groundwater issues, it also builds on the research that we have been doing about groundwater problems in historic Cairo and solutions such as dewatering, drainage, mechanical and chemical interruption, desalination, etc. And I just want to note that the water, the groundwater in historic Cairo is not natural underground water from the aquifer. This is the result of seepage from the supply networks, most notably, with some infiltration from the sewage. So this is actually drinking water that is causing all this damage. Of course, it collects salt on the way and then causes further problems. And the manual that we want to prepare is actually a companion manual that we have already prepared, dealing only with issues of groundwater in historic settings. And this is available online in the link that you see below. And finally, the third component of this project links more to the community. And it is a continuation of the work that we do on extracting this groundwater, treating it if necessary, and then using it for the benefit of the community. Thereby, again, working within our mandate of linking people to heritage through mutual benefit. And we have been experimenting with different ways of extracting groundwater and using greening in particular, and using it as the basis for a program still in its inception phase of urban farming and urban gardening, and using also this the spaces that are created greening, like that you see in front of you, as places for the community, to bring the community together, to use it as a place where we continue to interact with the community and work with them as equal partners. And finally, this also builds on 10 years of experience through Athar Lina in working with heritage education and developing ways of integrating communities in the heritage process through education as well. So this is our first project. The second project, Heritage Works, links to what I just showed you in terms of heritage education. This is a heritage education and heritage that we have been working on for more than 4 years now. And the idea is to achieve a sort of economic empowerment for the community through craft, design, art, and culture experience, all of which are inspired by heritage and based in a knowledge of heritage as a resource. And this is also an attempt to diversify our own revenue streams so that some of the work that we do is actually self-funded through product lines and activities that are offered to the public for a fee. And all of these are different examples of the lines of the products and the services that we offer in partnership with the community. And this comes with in hand with a quite intensive training and for women and for to bring them into not just the process of making what's designed, in the process of designing what is being made as well. And you can see here some of our women in action. And this brings me, this is the gateway for explaining an older project that we think is very representative of the approach that we take in heritage industries in particular. And this project is the inspiration for one of our collections, the Hattaba collection. And this is a collection of textile products made with patchwork or khiyamiyya, which is a very typical and traditional craft in historic Cairo. And you see here on the left some of the products, and you see here on the right women of the second neighborhood where we work, Hattaba, working on a tapestry with some of the motifs. What is the story behind this wall hanging? The second neighborhood where we work at Hattaba is actually a truly blighted neighborhood. I'm sorry to say. It used to be a beautiful neighborhood, it still is, but a combination of issues, most notably, unfortunately, the fact that Al-Hattaba lies within the buffer zone of the heritage side of Cairo Citadel, meant that people were not allowed to conserve their buildings because they were slated for. It meant that people were allowed to build anew, and many of them collapsed due to poor management at the hand of visitors. This resulted in a listing of this neighborhood as an informal settlement, and we started work some years ago to advocate for the preservation of this neighborhood and for the regeneration of the neighborhood using heritage as a resource. So most of the work that we did was mostly participatory design and planning and proposals for the regeneration of the neighborhood using the heritage buildings, such as the listed buildings that you see in front of you, or historic residential buildings as kind of nodes for regeneration and for development in the neighborhood. But we also wanted to not just give a voice to the community, but really think about the meaning of heritage through this issue. Why is it that a neighborhood that is documented with the same urban fabric, with the same kinds of social and economic patterns and fabrics as early as the 19th century, why is it seen as unworthy of the title of heritage, and why is it seen as something that should be sacrificed for the heritage of the citadel? So what we set out to do in a side project called Women Quilt for Hattaba was to work with women of the neighborhood on their own stories and their own history, and use a medium that they are familiar with, the medium of khiyamiyya or patchwork, to express their own history. And this was the wall hanging that came out of it. Also film, you see an excerpt of it on the right. And we use the film for advocacy. We use the wall hanging for advocacy, but we also we managed to convince the government not to demolish the neighborhood, but we also continue to work with these women to produce products that are inspired by their own designs. And this is what I mean when I say that they are very much involved in the process of design. And this is something that we're working on quite extensively with members of the community in different formats, not just in the format that I just showed you. The fourth project, I will not go into a lot of detail, but I will refer to quite quickly. So Patterns of Cairo is actually a website. We have 3 websites to date, and for some crazy reason decided to add a 4th one to our headache of websites. And the idea here is to bring together the content that has been created through documentation of tens of historic buildings, listed monuments, not just by us, but by other teams working on conservation, and to use and to synthesize this documentation into a tool that can be used by designers and artisans for their own heritage-inspired designs. And the tool is to be as talkative, also tries to be as kind of flexible as possible, so that a copy of the patterns that we have in historic Cairo, but they are also a reflection and a meditation on the stories behind these patterns, intangible patterns such as patterns of production or exchange, etc. And the idea is to put together at least 200 of these patterns in a vectorized format that is suitable for designers, have it as cross-referenceable. I don't know, that's not a word, so that we can cross-reference between them as much as possible, and with as much information as possible, not just the standard historical information, but also, as I said, information that encourages people to reflect more on what is behind these patterns. Now, this project, as I said, builds on the conservation work that we do. It builds on continuous attempts that we have to present the result, not just as, look, this is a building, but what have we learned? And the film that you see in front of you is a very short film about the visitor center that we just finished working on in next to Imam Shafi'i Dome. It's not open yet, but the conservation project took 7 years. 5 of those were spent thinking about how to condense what we have learned into a very simple visitor center in a historic space that is attached to the dome, and to also link that to an urban experience around the dome that really conveys the history of the cemetery as we know it. This kind of work is also related to other kinds of work that we do to synthesize knowledge and to share it. We've worked on a number of toolkits, heritage education toolkits that are available online. This one is the result of work that we've done for UNHCR with children of refugees and children of historic Cairo together, to bring them together under an umbrella of shared history, if you will. And this is a full toolkit that is available online in Arabic for people, schools and individuals to use. This also links to other ways of sharing knowledge. Our 3 websites, as I mentioned, Athar Lina, Megawra, and Khalifa website. The Khalifa website is meant more for the layperson, and also to showcase the products and the services that we provide, and other products and services in Al-Khalifa neighborhood as well. And the Megawra the Athar Lina website focuses more on our projects. The Megawra website has Megawra Papers, which is an occasional publication that we prepare, that we publish whenever we're able to, and which is totally available online through our website. And finally, last but not least, this is one of the projects that we've been thinking about for a year and a half now, planning very slowly. And this is a partnership between two other architectural firms, Tantuba, Ashratuba, and Mansour for Architecture and Conservation. And the idea here is to use the content and the methodologies that have been developed through our work and the work of the two other firms who also focus on heritage, but also on issues of housing and informal settlements, etc. And to use this content to conceptualize a one-year program that provides tools and skills and knowledge to people who would like to work on the built environment the way we do, in a manner that is definitely not focused on new build, but that is focused on social justice, that is non-extractive, that participatory, and that is also interdisciplinary, because the kind of work that we do, as you saw, cannot be done by one discipline alone. I leave you with this thought, which I think sums up our understanding of heritage. This is from the National Heritage Council of South Africa, their definition of heritage. Heritage is what is preserved from the past as the living collective memory of a people, not only to inform the present about the past, but also to equip successful generations to fashion their future. It is what creates a sense of identity and assures rootedness and continuity, so that what is brought out by dynamism of culture is not changed for its own sake, but is a result of people's conscious choice to create a better life. And these are our website and our social media pages if you'd like to learn more, our email, and also I would it's always important to thank our network of partners and donors without whom this would never be possible, and to thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
May, I think maybe you can hear the applause from New York and the East Coast and around the world for that extraordinary and intense and rich presentation. Thank you so much for preparing that and for telling us so much about your work. I would say that 4 websites may seem like too much for you to maintain, but it's a gift to the rest of us, because it gives us so many ways to learn from these resources. So thank you for that. I have a few questions that I'd like to have a little discussion on, but let me remind those of you in the audience to put your questions in the Q&A. There are a few there already, but we'll have I think ample time to go to those questions in a few moments. One of the things that really strikes me as an absolutely foundational part of all of your projects, and maybe this is quite obvious, is the partnerships and the organizational complexities. Those I think have become, I think it's widely recognized that most good things that happen only happen because of partnerships. But I know it's much more complex than that, and those complexities change in different places. The complexities of Philadelphia and New York and Cairo are all different in their ways. I wonder if you'd reflect for a minute about the organizational arrangements of your projects as part of the design work, because I think we often tend to separate the organization and management of a project from the design work. But I suspect that the design starts much earlier and includes the management and the organizational structures.
I totally agree, and I thank you for design, which I think it is all the time, and it is an integral part of how we manage to get anything done. There are a number of different restrictions and parameters, but there are also opportunities to be had. So, for example, why are we 2 entities, legal entities, not one? It is because the kind of work, there is no legal framework in Egypt that allows to do the kind of work that we do under one legal entity. So that required that there would be two of them. We started off actually as a cultural space many lifetimes ago, and so we continue to maintain this public program of cultural activities, and it is not just important to to disseminate and to publicize our work. It is also important to create networks, and without the network we create, it's not possible to do the work that we do, mostly because it is extremely diverse in terms of disciplines and skills and knowledge. So we have to tap into the different kinds of skills and knowledge that are required through our partnerships, whether with universities or other professional partners, or through quite an extensive program of volunteerism and internships. And that too is vital. Then comes the role of our governmental partners. And there it becomes really sometimes an ethical problem, because it might be the case that we do not agree with some of the policies of the government. And then the question becomes, how do you walk that line between collaborating because you have to, but at the same time not crossing, into the point where you're almost co-opted by co-optation, and how this works. And within all of that, it's always a kind of a keeping track of where we are, because as things expand, sometimes almost organically, in response to both opportunities and challenges, it becomes difficult for even us to understand what we're doing sometimes.
I have a million questions to follow up on, but the first one that comes to mind, you may have already begun to answer. What drives the complexity of the organizations for particular projects? Is it, I assume it's a combination of a lot of different things. The opportunities and barriers of public policies you mentioned, the realities that this work is so complex, and Cairo and its neighborhoods are so complex that no one discipline can really manage change by themselves. I also assume that financing is part of what drives the complexity. So can you talk a little bit about how you manage that mix of drivers?
So the built environment is complex wherever we are, and I think that's important, and is an important kind of place to start. And it cannot be dealt with through one discipline or set of skills or knowledge alone. So that is already quite problematic. But it's also extremely interesting. In many cases, opportunities drive us as much as challenges and as restrictions. So and we grow through opportunities to a point where sometimes it becomes difficult to manage, and then we limit ourselves as certain challenges and restrictions happen. But we kind of never drop the ball in any idea, so they're always there in the background. So it's a question of also institutional memory, which is really problematic in our case. And this is why we've been focusing for the last 2-3 years very much on synthesizing knowledge and organizing methodologies and maybe sharing it in different ways, etc. Finance is problematic, mostly because most of our projects are donor-based, and most of the funding does not come from Egypt. Heritage is not seen as a worthy kind of recipient of funding in Egypt. It would go more to charity, to health, etc. Now that we have gone more into the field of socioeconomic development, and education as well, this is easing up a little bit, but it's still not as easy. But I'd like to say one thing, that one of the best things that we have learned is the fact, so we always try to diversify revenue, but we also work in a dual way. So the office is a professional entity. So it will take commissions, it will be asked to work on consultancies, etc., etc. So that generates an income that is very different from what the NGO generates, which is mostly donor-based. Right. And now that we've also added the revenue stream of the products and the lines that we do, this diversity is very important, but it is constantly a challenge. It is not our biggest challenge, though, I have to say.
What is the biggest challenge, would you say?
The biggest challenge is how fluid everything is. That you are working in a constant, in a state of flux all the time, in terms of the economic condition, in terms of the political condition, in terms even of the social condition. And so you cannot plan ahead, and you're always trying to keep track of where you have gone in order to survive. So it's this is always our biggest challenge.
You speak for all of us, I think. We understanding and being able to connect to the ever-changing economic and political conditions certainly is vexing here where I sit in Philadelphia, as elsewhere. To go maybe one level deeper on the managerial issues before pivoting away. One of the being driven or by opportunities and foundation funds and other kinds of donated funds, those often come with a requirement to be able to track progress, measure success, and measurement in the cultural fields is such a vexed idea. I assume that you, like all of us, you are pushed to demonstrate measures of success. And each sponsor maybe has each source of revenue has its own measure, but has that been a kind of an overarching challenge for your organizations about how you think internally about success and then communicate that outwardly?
Yes, it's a challenge because there is quite a deep divide between how we think internally about success and what we're required to do to monitor and evaluate.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the time that goes in the monitoring and evaluation requirements of donors it's increasing exponentially, which I do not think is a good idea, because it is not just time, it is also how structured it has become, to the point where it does not really allow us to be innovative and to be proactive in how we evaluate ourselves. There are some very interesting lines of thought that we would like to pursue, and I would actually like to refer to your valuable work on evaluation and of cultural heritage. And we've been working with this quite a lot actually, and we feel that there is an obvious link to cultural preservation, to heritage management, etc., between that and well-being and even socioeconomic improvement. There are ways of quantifying this link, but they are there in theory. They are not as easy in practice.
Yeah.
Not just because of the fact that the process for quantifying is not clear to all, but also because many of the impacts are long-term. So we do not have the baseline kind of information that allows us to make these kinds of claims.
Yeah.
This is always a problem.
Yeah, indeed. You mentioned a moment ago about a very resonant point that current economic and political conditions are the biggest influence on one's work. Certainly, that is shared, I think, here and on this side of the ocean. Could you reflect a little bit more openly on how you see your work, which is so deeply rooted in Cairo, being relevant and resonant to those of us working elsewhere? Not in the kind of simplistic terms of like technique and particular narratives, but just as kind of an approach to the work.
I think that is extremely relevant, if only because certain methodologies and ways of thinking are developed on the ground really fast, and they are they are very responsive, as I said, to fast changing conditions. And this is something that we're starting to see in the rest of the world, but we have had for a very long time in countries such as ours. I think definitely the Global South is the new urban lab. It is where we should go and where we should look for new ways of dealing with crises such as the environmental crisis, for example, discrepancies in wealth, disaster, issues related to disaster, to war, etc., etc. We have been that place for decades. The problem is whatever knowledge and methodology is produced does not go out into the world, mostly because we don't have the time to do it, because we are busy dealing with the next crisis. So I think it is important to start to focus on this and to also understand that there are concepts that are culturally diverse, that we ourselves deal on a day-to-day basis, and that are not and that are common to many places all over the world, both in the global and to the global south. Concepts sometimes very philosophical, such as our understanding of time and place, for example, the role of spirituality in the world, the role of charity in the world, etc. That these we know about them, but we are kind of sometimes called anecdotal in how we describe things, but it is not anecdotal. It is rooted in real experiences that have yet to be synthesized in a manner that makes them methodology or theory. And that is one of my kind of pet peeves, if you read, I think they're trying to work on now to remedy.
That is such an important lesson. Thank you, May, for giving that, saying that so fluently and profoundly. I have just one very different question to ask, and then we'll go to the questions in the Q&A. And this, I shared this with you in an email recently, that as I learned more about your projects through your many websites, I was struck that so many of the projects and so many aspects of the projects were just beautiful, and not just the artifacts that were made for the purpose of being such, among other reasons. But I just wondered if you could reflect for a moment on the kind of aesthetic approach or the aesthetic life of your work, which may not be first or the most urgent or what keeps you up at night, but I imagine that the beauty and the aesthetic qualities of your work is something that you care about.
You know, I have a slide that I show students in particular when I'm showing our work. It is the slide of that shows an image of a dump that we had converted into a football pitch, and it shows that really the design is not that wonderful. And the slide says, "Working in this field will not earn you architectural awards or win you competitions." And because for years we've kind of we've almost taken pride in the fact that we are more focused on the basics of things rather than thinking about the aesthetics of the design, etc. But what we found through the years is that we do have an aesthetic, and that it comes very much from the experiences that we have and the work that we do and the kinds of buildings that we work in and the encounters that we have. And it's starting to come forth more and more, which I'm very happy about. And what I also am happy about is something that you said, Randy, which is the fact that we have to start thinking of conservation as design. We have to think of the field of heritage as a field of design, and see that it is inextricably linked to art and design and creativity. And that's what we're starting to kind of see in ourselves as we grow. If you had seen what we produced 8 years ago, you would have not said that at all.
Well, I might have, but I hear your point. Yeah, it's a big turn in our field to be able to think in those terms. So there are a number of questions in the Q&A. So with some of the time we have left, if you don't mind, I'll read some of those and ask you to fill in some responses. So Derek Moore wrote a couple of questions about some of the details of the urban projects. Particularly, did you receive good support and coordination from the municipality with regard to infrastructure? And related to that, has there been any movement to reverse the buffer zone policy and to actually do reconstruction in some of those destroyed contexts?
So concerning the first question, we work quite extensively with the municipality. It is a choppy relationship. Sometimes it works very well, sometimes not as much as such, but generally, yes, we have to work with them. They actually are the only governmental agencies that has funded some of our work, which is quite a thing to say. We have managed to lobby for some improvements in infrastructure, but when we reach the stage of implementation, what they do is very different from what we propose. So sometimes it's not as useful as we would like it to be. So there is this divide somehow. At the end of the day, we reach decision makers, but can't really claim to guide them as we would like to, or to be really involved in the decision-making process. We're still outsiders in that way, also because of the way we work. Concerning buffer zones, now this is an interesting question, because the law says in Egypt that a buffer zone is simply a protection zone. That if you want to build within that protection zone, if you want to plant a tree, if you want to dig, if you want to restore your home, etc., you cannot do it without permission from the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, which is fair enough, which is important. But what had happened over the years is that they had truncated that law, and they stopped at you cannot build, you cannot dig, you cannot. So these areas became areas of evacuation and demolition. This is not the law. This is not what the law says. Now the government understands that this is not what the law says a little bit. So it is possible to maneuver. It is also, they are also more open to adaptive reuse of these sites for the and the areas around them for the benefit of the community. This also is something new. Will they reverse it? No, especially because parallel to the understanding of certain of the ministry itself of these issues, there is a larger trend that is more on the national level, to really not care about the urban fabric. And this is why so much demolition has been happening. So it's it's a bit of this and a bit of that.
I find that's always, it always is an important gap in which the slack of policies between municipalities, state levels in our country and the national ministries or national agencies is trouble happens in those gaps between the different layers of government. Not to mention the gaps between different departments, agencies within each level. So related to that, there was a question from an anonymous attendee specifically about the reconstruction of Al-Hataba and particularly how residents were involved in that.
Okay. The residents were very much involved. Now, working with communities is tricky, and it's been really a learning experience doing that over the last 10 years. I remember at the beginning when we started to study participatory approaches, and the things I presented in the literature is always very neat and it's not at all. The most important issue is the fact that communities don't have the time for you, they do not trust you, and they're very diverse, and there's no such thing the community says X or Y. One notable exception is if the community feels it is under threat, and this is the case in Hattab. So whereas in Al-Khalifa, for example, when we work with it took us a very long time to start to engage members of the community and to build trust. In Al-Hattaba, we were there to address a need they had. They did not want neighborhood to be demolished, they did not want to move, which meant that immediately we were able to work with them. We normally start with a trust building present, if you will, to the community. In this case, we transformed a small dump into a small neighborhood garden. And through that, we started the conversation. It's a small neighborhood, we got to know everyone quite fast. And when we prepared the proposal for the regeneration, we actually took a model every single street in Al-Hattaba. There are not that many, there are around 7. So, I mean, it's not a lot. And discussed what we had proposed and tweaked our proposal accordingly. Now, I have to also say that our experience in Hattaba is both a success and a failure. And we have lots of failures. I did not refer to this, but it's important to say that the kind of work that we do fails quite a bit of the time. So it's a success in the sense that the place was not demolished and people were not moved. It is a failure because we were not able to generate the governmental interest or the funds to start working on the repair of these buildings, which means that they keep on falling, which means that people are now really under a threat of the threat of their lives if they continue to live in these buildings. So I'm not quite sure how to, at the end, describe the experience as a whole.
That it's ongoing, and I assume that it's an conservation and heritage is much more of a verb than a noun, and one has to keep following it and keep watching it happen. So one final question that on a somewhat different note that I wanted to pose from the Q&A. This is from Mira Abdallah, and I'll quote it because it's right on point. "This was incredible!" exclamation point. Do you have any advice on designing new architecture that celebrates heritage while still being adaptive to more modern contexts?
So Mira, if you're an Arabic speaker, which I think you might be, we have a publication on our website that focuses on historic Cairo and studies all the laws related to construction in historic settings in historic Cairo. It's an annotated kind of guidebook, so that might be useful for you. I think the most important advice I would have is, one, you are guided by proportion and scale and not by style. And two, you intervene as little as possible. That what you have in a historic neighborhood is the result of layers on layers on layers of additions. Any attempt to make it one, sort of to make it cohesive, to make it have one kind of character, really takes from the history of this neighborhood. And that when we intervene in a historic neighborhood does not mean that we're copying the past. It means that we're being inspired by scale and by proportion, and also allowing the intangible heritage of the neighborhood to affect us somehow, to understand the kind of what is not seen or touched, but what is felt, and that would be the focus of the design. That would be my.
Great. Well, you should be a professor to all young architects with that line of argument. That would be a good outcome, I think. So with that, let me see if there are a few more questions in the Q&A. Given that it's just 10 past 1, is it okay if I just ask you one more? I know it's very much later in Cairo than it is here on the East Coast. Let me see. This is from Anna Amari. She says, I'm curious if you've leveraged aspects of your efforts into product design as a financial resource or to otherwise enhance the value of heritage in Cairo, implementing the Patterns of Cairo work as a brand or such. And she's curious about how such an angle could be or has been integrated into your practice.
We started our work on product design and on services such as tours and walks and interactive heritage activities as a way of publicizing the neighborhood where we work, creating a buzz, as you say, around it, and also publicizing our work. So this was actually how we started off, how we started out. We since 2013, I think, we ran an annual event called Spend a Day in Khalifa, and we used it to tell the people there is a neighborhood called Al-Khalifa. They did not. Most people, middle class, upper middle class people who live in other places in Cairo did not know about Al-Khalifa. And then the products and the activities we started to see them also as an economic resource, and that's where we took them after a while. The Patterns of Cairo website, so far, we're thinking of it as a service, but we are also looking at ways of monetizing some of the services in the future, just for economic sustainability. And we also think of it as a service to ourselves, because one of the challenges that we've had is to collect all that we know about historic Cairo and the resources that exist that can be an inspiration for design, so that we are able to use them as well. So we're designing it from the perspective of people who have been working in this field for a number of years now.
Great. Well, with that, I think we will probe you no further with more questions. This has been such a fantastically rich series of discussions and projects. We're really grateful, May, for your work and for taking the time to present it to probably a mostly, if not entirely, U.S. audience. I think it'll be an inspiration to many of us. And with that, I'll turn it back to our colleagues at the Architectural League, Rafi and Anne, Mario. thank you so much for hosting this.